Every day, millions of people struggle with stubborn visceral fat, the kind that sits deep around your organs, quietly driving inflammation, insulin resistance, and long-term disease. And yet, the solution people search for is often far more complicated than it needs to be, because sometimes it comes down to one small, consistent habit. Just a single tablespoon of the right food can shift your hormones, calm hunger, and push your body back into a fat-burning state. When you understand how the body actually works, how it reacts to certain fats, how it stabilizes insulin, and how it mobilizes stored energy, you realize that small daily actions can create dramatic internal change. So, today I want to show you why adding just 1 tablespoon of this powerful ingredient can help unlock your metabolic system and begin shrinking visceral fat from the inside out. Visceral fat is often misunderstood because most people still think of weight gain in terms of simple calories in and calories out. But visceral fat has very little to do with counting calories and everything to do with hormones, especially insulin. When insulin stays elevated throughout the day due to frequent eating, high-sugar foods, processed snacks, or chronic stress, the body loses its ability to burn stored fat efficiently. Instead of accessing energy from within, the body is constantly told to store more. Visceral fat becomes a storage depot that expands quietly and steadily even when someone believes they are not eating that much. This is why 2 people can eat the same number of calories yet experience completely different outcomes. One stores more visceral fat because their hormonal environment is primed for fat accumulation. Understanding this hormonal foundation changes the entire approach to fat loss because it shifts the focus from restriction to restoring metabolic balance. Visceral fat is particularly dangerous because of its unique behavior inside the body. Unlike subcutaneous fat, the soft fat under the skin, visceral fat behaves more like an active organ. It releases inflammatory molecules, increases cortisol, disrupts insulin sensitivity, and interferes with normal appetite regulation. This leads to a cycle where high insulin drives fat storage, visceral fat increases inflammation, inflammation worsens insulin resistance, and insulin resistance keeps insulin high. It becomes a metabolic loop that traps people for years, even when they try dieting, exercising more, or cutting calories. Breaking this cycle requires lowering insulin, calming inflammation, and improving metabolic flexibility, so the body can shift from storing fat to burning it. This is why understanding hormones matters far more than tracking numbers on a plate. When insulin levels stay low for longer periods, the body naturally transitions into a fat-burning state. This is not a forced process, but rather a return to what the body is designed to do. Use stored energy when food intake is low and store energy when food intake is high. The issue is that modern eating patterns rarely allow insulin to fall. Snacking from morning to night, sweetened coffee drinks, processed carbohydrates, and even constant healthy snacks interrupt the fasting period that the body needs to trigger fat burning. Because visceral fat is so hormonally sensitive, it responds quickly to insulin changes. Even small improvements in insulin control can begin reducing it. People often notice that when insulin drops, their waist circumference begins changing first because visceral fat is some of the earliest fat to respond. Another overlooked factor is the role of stress hormones in visceral fat accumulation. Cortisol, often elevated due to chronic stress, lack of sleep, and emotional pressure, signals the body to store more fat centrally around the organs. This is why individuals under stress often develop more belly fat. Even if their overall weight doesn't change drastically, cortisol works hand in hand with insulin. When one rises, the other often follows. Lowering stress, managing sleep, and improving hormonal balance all support visceral fat reduction. People who finally address their daily habits not by extreme dieting, but by stabilizing hormones, often see changes in their midsection, even before the scale moves. Food quality also plays a major role. Highly processed foods spike insulin rapidly and keep it elevated longer. Sugars, refined grains, artificial additives, and seed oils push the body into a metabolic state where fat burning becomes nearly impossible. On the other hand, foods that digest slowly, stabilize blood sugar, and support hormonal health create the internal conditions needed for visceral fat to shrink. This is why one small daily habit, such as consuming a tablespoon of the right healthy fat, can make a significant difference. Healthy fats slow digestion, reduce insulin spikes, keep hunger controlled, and encourage the body to rely more on stored energy. They help rebalance hormones, calm inflammation, and prime the body for metabolic repair. When this happens consistently, visceral fat begins to respond. The emotional side of visceral fat is also important to understand. People often feel frustrated because they believe they've tried everything, counting calories, exercising hard, or skipping meals, and still can't lose belly fat. The problem isn't a lack of effort, but a lack of hormonal alignment. Without addressing insulin resistance, appetite hormones, stress pathways, and inflammation, the body simply refuses to release visceral fat. Once people learn that their body isn't fighting them, but reacting to hormonal signals, they gain a new sense of empowerment. Instead of blaming their metabolism, they start understanding how to work with it. Visceral fat reduction becomes possible when someone creates an environment where insulin stays lower for longer periods, inflammation decreases, and the liver can function more efficiently. The liver is central to fat metabolism, and when it becomes overloaded with sugars, processed fats, and toxins, it pushes more fat into the abdominal cavity. Healing the liver through better food choices, time-restricted eating, and hormonal balancing leads to dramatic improvements in visceral fat levels. People often notice better digestion, more stable energy, deeper sleep, and reduced cravings. As these internal systems begin aligning again, when the hormonal framework is understood, fat loss becomes less about punishment and more about restoration. The body begins functioning in a rhythm that supports health rather than working against it. This is why focusing on hormones, especially insulin, creates lasting and meaningful change in visceral fat reduction because the process aligns with the body's natural design instead of fighting it. 1 tablespoon of the right healthy fat can have a profound effect on insulin levels. And understanding why requires looking at how the body processes food on a hormonal level rather than a numerical one. Most people assume that eating fat automatically leads to gaining fat, but metabolism doesn't operate that way. Fat has a minimal impact on insulin, especially when compared to carbohydrates and sugars, which trigger a sharp spike that forces the body into storage mode. When insulin rises, fat burning shuts off almost immediately because insulin's primary job is to store energy. But when someone consumes a healthy fat, particularly one rich in stable natural fatty acids, the insulin response stays extremely low. This allows the body to remain in a metabolic state where it can continue drawing from stored energy rather than being forced to store the energy from food. What makes 1 tablespoon so powerful is not the number of calories it contains, but the hormonal signal it sends. It tells the body that energy is available without pushing insulin high, keeping fat-burning pathways open. Healthy fats also slow down digestion and help prevent the rapid blood sugar spikes that come from eating highly processed foods or refined carbohydrates. When blood sugar rises quickly, insulin follows. When blood sugar rises slowly and evenly, insulin stays controlled. This is why consuming a tablespoon of a high-quality fat before or with a meal can change the way the entire meal affects the body. Instead of a sudden surge in glucose, digestion becomes steadier and more gradual, putting far less pressure on the pancreas and keeping insulin low. Over time, this leads to improved insulin sensitivity, meaning cells respond better to insulin, and less of it is required to manage blood sugar. With lower baseline insulin, it becomes easier for the body to access stubborn stored fat, including visceral fat deep around the organs. When insulin levels stabilize, hunger and cravings begin to stabilize as well. High insulin drives hunger, because when insulin pushes glucose out of the bloodstream and into the cells, the brain sometimes interprets this drop as a lack of fuel, even if plenty of energy is stored in the body. This is why people can eat a large meal high in refined carbs and still feel hungry soon after. Adding healthy fats helps prevent this internal roller coaster. The body receives a steady, reliable supply of energy, and hunger hormones like ghrelin and leptin begin functioning more normally. Ghrelin, the hormone that triggers hunger, lowers when digestion is slow and steady. Leptin, the hormone that signals fullness, becomes more accurate when insulin is well controlled. Over time, people find they're satisfied with less food and feel calmer around eating because their hormones are finally communicating properly. Stabilizing insulin also supports energy balance throughout the day. Many people experience mid-morning crashes, afternoon fatigue, or evening binge eating because their insulin and blood sugar are constantly rising and falling. A simple daily tablespoon of the right fat helps maintain stable blood sugar levels, which keeps energy consistent. This prevents a cycle of overcaffeinating, overeating, or reaching for sugary snacks when energy dips. When insulin is stable, the body becomes better at switching between burning incoming food and burning stored fat. This metabolic flexibility is essential for reducing visceral fat because it ensures the body is not locked into storage mode all day long. The effects extend beyond hunger and energy. Chronic high insulin is linked to inflammation, especially around the liver and abdominal area. Visceral fat itself is a source of inflammatory molecules, and this inflammation increases insulin resistance, creating a vicious cycle. Healthy fats rich in natural antioxidants and anti-inflammatory compounds help lower inflammation throughout the body. When inflammation decreases, insulin sensitivity improves further, creating a feedback loop where insulin levels drop, fat burning increases, and the body shifts out of the chronic inflammatory state that supports visceral fat growth. Even a small daily habit can trigger this shift when done consistently. Another way healthy fats help stabilize insulin is through their impact on the liver. The liver is responsible for managing glucose, processing fats, and storing glycogen. When it becomes overwhelmed with sugar and processed oils, it becomes fatty and inflamed, contributing to higher insulin levels and more visceral fat storage. A tablespoon of the right fat helps support the liver by providing clean energy that doesn't overload the glucose pathways. Instead, the liver can convert these fats into ketones, an alternative fuel source that does not require insulin to use. When the body begins using more ketones, insulin levels naturally fall and fat oxidation increases. This shift reduces stress on the liver and begins clearing out some of the fat stored around it. A consistent daily intake of high-quality fats trains the body to become more efficient at burning fat as fuel. When insulin stays lower, the body doesn't feel pressure to store energy immediately. Instead, it begins pulling more readily from stored reserves. This is especially helpful for people who struggle with belly fat despite dieting or exercising. Their issue is rarely a lack of effort, but rather an inability to lower insulin long enough for fat burning to occur. Even a small, predictable dose of healthy fat each day helps the body remain in a state where insulin is controlled, hunger is stable, and metabolic pathways are open for fat mobilization from deeper stores like visceral fat. Over time, this simple habit becomes a powerful tool for restoring balance and helping the body return to its natural rhythm of using energy efficiently and steadily. Fatty acids play a central role in activating stored fat burning, and understanding how they work inside the body reveals why something as small as a tablespoon of the right fat can create such a powerful metabolic shift. The body is constantly deciding whether to store energy or burn it, and this decision is largely influenced by the type of fuel you give it. When healthy fats enter the system, they send a signal that promotes the use of stored fat rather than shutting it down. Unlike carbohydrates, which demand a rapid insulin response, fatty acids enter the bloodstream without triggering a major hormonal spike. This low insulin environment is what allows the body to access stored energy, particularly visceral fat hidden deep around the organs. When fatty acids begin circulating, they encourage the body to release more fatty acids from storage, creating a cycle where stored fat becomes a primary source of fuel. Fatty acids support fat burning by activating metabolic pathways in the mitochondria. These tiny powerhouses inside your cells decide whether to burn glucose or fat, and they naturally shift toward fat burning when carbohydrates are limited and fatty acids are readily available. By consuming a tablespoon of healthy fat, you supply the body with a clean source of fuel that does not interfere with fat oxidation. When glucose isn't constantly flooding the bloodstream, mitochondria become more efficient at breaking down fatty acids. Over time, this retrains the body to rely more heavily on fat for energy instead of being glued to sugar. For people who have spent years overeating refined carbohydrates, this shift can feel like unlocking a stuck metabolic switch. Suddenly, energy becomes more stable, hunger becomes more controlled, and the body stops desperately holding on to visceral fat as a backup supply. One of the most powerful actions of fatty acids is their ability to stimulate the release of stored fat from adipose tissue. When insulin is low and fatty acids are circulating, the body activates an enzyme called hormone-sensitive lipase. This enzyme is responsible for breaking down stored triglycerides into free fatty acids that can be used as energy. When this enzyme stays dormant due to high insulin, fat remains locked in storage. But when you introduce healthy fats that keep insulin low, hormone-sensitive lipase wakes up and begins releasing fuel. This process is called lipolysis, and it is the key to shrinking visceral fat. The deep abdominal fat surrounding the organs is particularly sensitive to hormonal signals. So when insulin drops and lipolysis increases, this visceral fat is among the first to be targeted. Fatty acids also play an important role in stabilizing energy levels, which indirectly supports fat burning. When someone relies heavily on carbohydrates, their energy tends to rise and crash throughout the day. These crashes lead to cravings, impulsive eating, and overeating, behaviors that make fat loss nearly impossible. Healthy fats digest slowly and provide sustained energy that lasts for hours, reducing the urge to snack or overconsume. When cravings decrease, the time between meals naturally increases, allowing insulin to remain low for longer stretches. These fasting windows are where the real fat burning occurs. A body fueled by steady fatty acids becomes far more comfortable entering these natural metabolic breaks because energy remains stable and hunger feels manageable. Over time, the body becomes more resilient and more efficient at using stored fat as a consistent energy source. Another overlooked benefit of fatty acids is their ability to support the liver's fat processing functions. The liver is responsible for converting stored fat into usable energy. But when it becomes overloaded with processed foods, sugars, and unhealthy oils, this process slows dramatically. Healthy fats, especially those rich in monounsaturated or medium-chain fatty acids, help the liver operate more efficiently. They improve bioproduction, enhance fat digestion, and support metabolic pathways that clear out accumulated liver fat. When the liver becomes healthier, it becomes better at mobilizing visceral fat as well, because the two types of fat are closely linked. As liver function improves, the body becomes more effective at breaking down and transporting fatty acids for fuel, accelerating the reduction of deep abdominal fat. Fatty acids also help regulate hormones that influence appetite, metabolism, and fat storage. They play a role in supporting the production of hormones related to satiety and energy balance. When these hormones improve, the body becomes more balanced and less driven by constant hunger signals. Leptin, the hormone that signals fullness, becomes more effective when fatty acids are part of the diet. Ghrelin, the hormone that signals hunger, becomes more stable as well. These shifts reduce overeating and help create a hormonal environment where the body is not constantly storing energy. This balance is essential for burning visceral fat because hormonal stability ensures the body can consistently access stored reserves rather than defaulting to storage mode. On a deeper level, fatty acids help reduce inflammation, which is closely tied to visceral fat accumulation. Visceral fat is metabolically active and produces inflammatory chemicals that disrupt normal hormone function. Healthy fats contain natural anti-inflammatory compounds that help calm this internal stress. When inflammation decreases, insulin resistance improves, and the pathways involved in fat burning become more responsive. A less inflamed body stores less visceral fat and releases more of it when needed. This creates a positive cycle where improved fat metabolism reduces inflammation, and reduced inflammation enhances fat metabolism even further. Reducing cravings and overeating is one of the most powerful yet underrated benefits of adding a tablespoon of the right healthy fat into your daily routine. Most people think cravings come from a lack of willpower, but cravings are almost always hormonal. When blood sugar rises too quickly and then crashes, the body sends urgent hunger signals to push you toward fast energy. This leads to overeating, snacking between meals, and reaching for foods that spike insulin even higher. But when you introduce healthy fats, the entire rhythm of hunger begins to change. Healthy fats digest slowly and steadily, releasing energy over a longer period. This helps maintain stable blood sugar and prevents the sharp highs and lows that trigger cravings. With just 1 tablespoon, you create a foundation of sustained energy that allows the body to remain calm instead of swinging wildly between hunger and fullness. Stable energy leads to stable eating patterns, and that makes reducing visceral fat much more achievable. Healthy fats also trigger the release of satiety hormones that help control appetite naturally. When you consume fats rich in stable fatty acids, the body releases cholecystokinin, a hormone that signals fullness to the brain. This hormone tells your digestive system to slow down and your brain to reduce hunger signals. As a result, you feel satisfied for longer periods without needing to snack or graze constantly. This is especially important for people who feel hungry shortly after meals, even when they eat enough calories. The problem is not the amount of food, but the type of food. Highly processed carbohydrates burn quickly and leave the stomach empty, sending the brain into a state of eat now. By adding a tablespoon of healthy fat, digestion slows, nutrients absorb more efficiently, and the brain receives stronger, clearer signals that the body is nourished. This naturally leads to eating less throughout the day, without forcing restriction. Another reason healthy fats reduce cravings is their impact on insulin levels. When insulin stays high, the body is stuck in storage mode, meaning it's unable to access stored energy. This lack of accessible energy creates sensations of hunger. Even when the body has plenty of fat stored, people often mistake this for emotional hunger, but it's really metabolic hunger. Introducing healthy fats keeps insulin stable and low, which allows the body to tap into its stored fat supplies for fuel. When the body has access to stored energy, cravings decrease dramatically because energy becomes consistent and reliable. This state allows the mind to feel in control rather than driven by constant urges to eat. Once the metabolic pathways open and the body can burn its own fat efficiently, hunger becomes a quieter, more manageable signal rather than a loud demand. Healthy fats also help reduce overeating through their effect on the reward system in the brain. Processed foods, sugar, and refined carbs overstimulate dopamine pathways, creating a cycle where the brain craves more stimulation. This leads to binge eating, late-night snacking, and emotional cravings that feel almost addictive. Healthy fats, on the other hand, provide satisfaction without overstimulation. They help rebalance the brain's reward centers, so eating becomes a normal biological response rather than compulsive behavior. When the brain stops chasing quick bursts of energy, cravings naturally decline. People begin to crave real food instead of processed snacks because their bodies are finally getting the nourishment they need. This shift is essential for reducing visceral fat because overeating and emotional eating are major contributors to fat accumulation around the organs. Slowing digestion is another key reason a tablespoon of healthy fat is so effective at controlling overeating. When digestion slows, nutrients absorb better, blood sugar remains stable, and meals feel more satisfying. This eliminates the rapid emptying effect that carb-heavy meals have. When food moves through the digestive system at a controlled pace, the body remains fuel for longer. This reduces the likelihood of reaching for snacks, especially in the late afternoon or evening, when cravings tend to spike. Over time, these longer periods between meals become natural fasting windows. Fasting windows are where insulin drops and real fat burning occurs, particularly around the abdominal cavity. Healthy fats help the body ease into these windows without discomfort, making the process feel smooth rather than forced. Reducing cravings also helps break the emotional cycle linked to stress eating. When blood sugar is unstable, the body interprets hunger as urgency, and this can increase anxiety. Many people eat not because they are physically hungry, but because unstable energy and stress hormones push them toward food for relief. When healthy fats stabilize blood sugar and provide steady energy, stress-related cravings decrease. The mind feels calmer, decision-making becomes easier, and emotional triggers lose their power. Over time, people find they are no longer fighting against food urges. They simply don't feel them the same way anymore. This shift brings a sense of freedom and control that makes long-term fat loss feel more sustainable. Healthy fats even support gut health in ways that reduce cravings. An unhealthy gut produces chemicals that increase hunger, craving for sugar, and inflammation that interferes with hormonal balance. Healthy fats nourish the gut lining, support beneficial bacteria, and reduce inflammation. A healthier gut sends better signals to the brain, making cravings less intense and appetite more regulated. As the gut heals, the body becomes more efficient at digesting and absorbing nutrients, which further reduces the urge to overeat. All of these factors combine to make 1 tablespoon of healthy fat a surprisingly powerful tool for changing the way the body experiences hunger and fullness. By stabilizing hormones, calming cravings, slowing digestion, improving gut health, and supporting long-term energy balance, this small daily habit creates the internal environment necessary for sustainable fat burning, especially in the visceral area where hormonal imbalance and overeating often take hold. Inflammation plays a central role in the development and persistence of visceral fat, and understanding this connection reveals why a simple daily tablespoon of the right fat can have such a powerful impact on metabolic healing. Visceral fat is not just passive storage tissue. It is biologically active and constantly releasing inflammatory chemicals called cytokines. These chemicals disrupt hormonal balance, interfere with insulin sensitivity, and create a cycle where the body becomes increasingly resistant to fat burning. The more inflamed the body becomes, the easier it is for visceral fat to grow, and the harder it becomes to lose it. This internal inflammation stresses the liver, affects the gut, and increases oxidative stress throughout the body. Introducing a healthy fat rich in anti-inflammatory fatty acids helps interrupt this cycle by calming inflammation at its root. When inflammation decreases, hormones begin functioning more effectively, and the body can finally shift out of survival mode and into healing mode. Healthy fats help reduce inflammation by providing the body with essential fatty acids that support cellular repair. Many people underestimate how much their cells rely on healthy fats to maintain flexible, functional cell membranes. When the cells are made with poor quality fats like those found in refined seed oils, the membranes become rigid and inflamed. This affects how nutrients enter the cells, how waste leaves, and how insulin communicates with them. Over time, this cellular dysfunction fuels insulin resistance, which is one of the major drivers of visceral fat accumulation. A tablespoon of a nourishing fat each day supplies the building blocks cells need to repair themselves and reduce inflammatory responses. As cells recover and function more efficiently, insulin receptors become more responsive, allowing insulin levels to drop and fat-burning pathways to reopen. Inflammation is also deeply tied to oxidative stress, which occurs when the body produces more free radicals than it can neutralize. Visceral fat is a major source of oxidative stress because it continuously releases inflammatory molecules into circulation. These molecules damage tissues, burden the liver, and push the immune system into overactivity. Healthy fats rich in antioxidants help counter this oxidative burden. They stabilize free radicals, reduce cellular stress, and support the body's natural detoxification processes. When oxidative stress decreases, inflammation naturally lowers as well. This reduction in internal stress allows the metabolic system to function more smoothly, making it easier for the body to break down and use stored fat. Supporting the liver is another crucial way healthy fats reduce inflammation and encourage metabolic healing. The liver processes everything you eat and plays a central role in managing blood sugar, insulin, and fat metabolism. When inflammation is high, the liver becomes overwhelmed and its ability to convert stored fat into energy slows down. This leads to more fat being deposited around the liver and abdominal cavity. Certain healthy fats, especially those with natural anti-inflammatory compounds, help lighten the liver's workload by providing a clean, stable fuel source that doesn't spike insulin or require intense metabolic processing. As the liver becomes less inflamed and begins functioning more efficiently, it becomes easier for the body to mobilize visceral fat and convert it into usable energy. The gut also plays a major role in systemic inflammation, and healthy fats support gut health in ways that contribute directly to metabolic healing. The gut lining acts as a barrier that prevents inflammatory substances from entering the bloodstream. When this barrier becomes compromised, a condition known as leaky gut, inflammatory molecules from food and bacteria can seep into circulation and trigger widespread inflammation. This inflammation interferes with insulin sensitivity and contributes to visceral fat accumulation. Healthy fats help repair the gut lining, reduce irritation, and support beneficial bacteria that fight inflammation. A healthier gut sends fewer inflammatory signals into bloodstream, reducing the metabolic stress that often leads to stubborn belly fat. Inflammation also affects hunger and appetite regulation. When the body is inflamed, hormones involved in appetite, such as leptin and ghrelin, stop working properly. Leptin resistance, in particular, is linked to inflammation. Leptin is supposed to tell the brain that the body has enough stored energy. But when inflammation disrupts the signaling process, the brain continues to think the body is starving. Even when visceral fat stores are full, this leads to overeating, increased cravings, and more fat storage. By reducing inflammation through daily intake of healthy fat, leptin signaling gradually improves. This allows the brain to receive accurate messages about hunger and fullness, reducing overeating and supporting natural fat burning. Chronic inflammation also keeps cortisol elevated, and cortisol is a major contributor to visceral fat growth. When inflammation is high, cortisol rises to help manage the internal stress. Over time, elevated cortisol drives fat toward the abdominal cavity, reinforcing the visceral fat cycle. Healthy fats with anti-inflammatory properties help lower the internal stress load, reducing the need for high cortisol output. As cortisol levels stabilize, the body stops directing fat toward the belly and begins allowing stored fat to be released for energy. This shift is essential for long-term metabolic healing because cortisol-driven fat storage is one of the most stubborn patterns to break. Reducing inflammation not only improves fat metabolism, but also enhances overall hormonal harmony. The body functions best in an environment where hormones communicate clearly and consistently. When inflammation is present, these signals become distorted and the body struggles to regulate energy balance. A simple daily tablespoon of the right fat supports the anti-inflammatory pathways that restore this balance. Once inflammation begins to fall and hormones return to their natural rhythms, the body no longer resists fat loss, especially in the visceral region where inflammation has the strongest influence. Supporting fasting and extending fat-burning windows is one of the most impactful benefits of adding a tablespoon of the right healthy fat into your daily routine. Many people struggle with fasting not because fasting itself is difficult, but because their metabolism is not yet adapted to using stored fat efficiently. When the body is dependent on quick-burning carbohydrates for energy, any drop in blood sugar triggers hunger, irritability, and cravings. But when healthy fat are introduced, they help bridge this energy gap by providing a slow, steady release of fuel. This allows the body to transition more comfortably into fasting periods without experiencing the sharp dips in energy that make fasting feel overwhelming. A tablespoon of healthy fat helps create metabolic stability, making fasting feel natural instead of forced. And this directly lengthens the amount of time the body spends in a fat-burning state. The primary reason healthy fats support fasting is their minimal impact on insulin. Fasting works because it lowers insulin long enough for the body to tap into stored energy. But if someone breaks their fast with foods that spike insulin, such as sugars, refined grains, or even excessive protein, they immediately turn off fat burning. Healthy fats, however, keep insulin extremely low, so the fat-burning state continues uninterrupted. This means you can maintain the benefits of fasting even during eating windows. A tablespoon of high-quality fat early in the day can help stabilize hunger signals and ease the transition into the fasting rhythm. Over time, this helps extend natural fasting windows without relying on rigid schedules or extreme dietary rules. Healthy fats also help reduce hunger during fasting by influencing hormones that regulate appetite. Ghrelin, the hormone that signals hunger, follows a predictable pattern throughout the day, rising and falling in waves. A small amount of healthy fat helps flatten these spikes by slowing digestion and keeping energy stable. When digestion is slower, the stomach releases satiety signals for a longer period, making hunger feel calmer and more manageable. This is one of the reasons people often find it easier to fast after adding healthy fats to their routine. The body stops panicking for quick energy and starts trusting its own stored reserves. As these hunger waves become easier to ride, fasting windows naturally lengthen, giving the body more time to burn visceral fat. Supporting metabolic flexibility is another way healthy fats enhance fasting. Metabolic flexibility refers to the body's ability to switch between burning glucose and burning fat. Many people today lack this flexibility due to years of constant snacking, high-carb meals, and reliance on sugar for quick energy. Their metabolism becomes locked in sugar-burning mode, making fasting feel nearly impossible because the body doesn't know how to access stored fat. Healthy fats help retrain the metabolism by encouraging the body to use fat as a primary fuel source. Once the body becomes comfortable using dietary fats, it becomes more confident in accessing stored fat as well. This improved flexibility allows fasting to feel smoother, more stable, and more effective for reducing visceral fat. Healthy fats also support fasting by improving liver function. The liver plays a central role in fasting because it releases stored glycogen and produces ketones when glucose is low. When the liver is overloaded with sugar or processed foods, this transition becomes more difficult. A tablespoon of the right fat supports the liver by providing a clean source of energy that doesn't require insulin and doesn't place additional metabolic stress on the organ. Over time, this helps the liver become more efficient at producing ketones, the alternative fuel source that powers the body during fasting. Ketones are especially important for reducing visceral fat because they encourage the breakdown of stored triglycerides and support high-energy processes without spiking blood sugar or insulin. Healthy fats also help reduce the discomfort associated with transitioning into a fasting state. Many people experience headaches, fatigue, irritability, or stomach discomfort when starting fasting because their blood sugar levels drop too quickly. A small amount of healthy fat slows this drop and provides a buffer, making the transition smoother. This helps people stick with fasting long enough to experience its benefits. As the body adapts, the need for this buffer decreases, but the habit still supports the overall rhythm of extended fat-burning windows. Another important way healthy fats support fasting is by helping stabilize mood and mental clarity. When glucose drops, people often experience brain fog or reduced concentration. This is because the brain is used to relying on sugar for energy. Healthy fats help the body produce ketones sooner, and ketones are preferred fuel for the brain. They provide steady mental energy that doesn't rely on constant eating. As a result, people find they can focus better, think more clearly, and feel emotionally steadier during fasting. This mental stability encourages longer fasting periods because the process feels sustainable rather than draining. Healthy fats also reduce inflammation, which directly enhances the effectiveness of fasting. Fasting itself is anti-inflammatory, but when chronic inflammation is present, the body struggles to achieve deeper metabolic healing. By calming inflammation, healthy fats make fasting more comfortable and allow the body to focus on repairing tissues, burning fat, and restoring hormonal balance. This combination accelerates the reduction of visceral fat, which is highly sensitive to hormonal and inflammatory changes. All of these factors work together to extend fat-burning windows throughout the day. Whether someone practices intermittent fasting, time-restricted eating, or simply avoids constant snacking, the metabolic effect is the same. Longer periods of low insulin lead to more consistent fat burning. A daily tablespoon of healthy fat makes this process easier, smoother, and far more effective by stabilizing energy, calming hunger, improving metabolic flexibility, and supporting the hormonal environment that allows fasting to work. Visceral fat often begins building up silently long before you ever notice a change in the mirror. One of the most overlooked reasons for this buildup is the strain it places on the liver. The liver is a command center for your metabolism, managing hormones, detoxification, energy processing, and fat storage. When the liver is overwhelmed by processed foods, sugars, seed oils, constant snacking, and stress hormones, it begins to store more fat as a protective mechanism. This accumulation doesn't just stay in the liver. It spreads into the abdominal cavity, slowly forming visceral fat around your organs. Improving liver function becomes one of the most effective ways to reduce this dangerous fat. Because once the liver begins working more efficiently, fat metabolism improves naturally. A daily tablespoon of the right healthy fat becomes powerful here because it gives the liver a break from the constant glucose spikes that come from frequent eating and refined carbohydrates. Healthy fats don't trigger insulin, and without insulin spikes, the liver gets a chance to redistribute energy instead of storing it. This lowering of metabolic pressure allows the liver to switch out of fat storage mode and back into fat-burning mode. Even this small habit gently nudges your metabolism toward using stored fat as fuel, especially the deep, stubborn fat around the organs. When your liver isn't fighting inflammation or constantly processing toxins, it can do what it was designed to do: regulate energy more intelligently. Healthy fats also help thin out and improve the flow of bile, which is essential for breaking down fats and eliminating waste. Many people don't realize that sluggish bile contributes to poor digestion, bloating, and fat accumulation. When bile flow improves, the liver releases fats more efficiently and detoxifies more effectively. Better bile flow supports the breakdown of the food you eat, helps move toxins out of the body, and assists in the mobilization of stored visceral fat. That 1 tablespoon begins acting like a gentle daily support system for the liver, something that reduces stress instead of adding to it. Another way liver function ties into visceral fat is through fatty liver development, which often happens silently. When the liver becomes overloaded with excess sugar that the body cannot burn, it turns that sugar into fat and stores it. Over time, this fat becomes trapped in the liver and surrounding tissues. Healthy fats, particularly those rich in certain fatty acids, can help reverse this process by improving insulin sensitivity and encouraging the liver to release stored fats. Even though it sounds counterintuitive, the right fats help remove the wrong fats because they shift the hormonal environment inside the body away from storage and toward utilization. The daily tablespoon also reduces inflammation, which is crucial because inflammation interrupts the liver's ability to function properly. Inflammation blocks metabolic communication between cells, slowing down fat metabolism and contributing to stubborn visceral fat. By lowering inflammation, the liver is able to reset its natural rhythm and begin regulating fat storage more normally. This internal shift often results in more energy, fewer cravings, and better digestion, signs that the liver is functioning more efficiently. Even hunger and fullness signals normalize when liver function improves. A struggling liver often sends mixed signals to the brain, leading to cravings, fatigue, and overeating. When the liver becomes healthier, those signals stabilize. You start feeling naturally satisfied with less food, and your appetite becomes more predictable. This improved appetite regulation plays a huge role in burning visceral fat because it naturally reduces overeating without requiring strict dieting or forceful willpower. When the liver works efficiently, hormones involved in fat regulation like insulin, cortisol, leptin, and glucagon begin aligning in a healthier pattern. This alignment is what ultimately accelerates visceral fat burning. The daily tablespoon supports this hormonal harmony by reducing liver stress at a metabolic level. It helps shift the body into a more sustained fat-burning state throughout the day, especially when paired with steady routines and reduced snacking. And finally, as the liver becomes healthier, energy levels rise. People often underestimate how much low energy contributes to fat gain. When you're tired, your body naturally craves fast energy in the form of sugar and refined carbs. A healthier liver provides steadier energy, reducing reliance on quick fixes and lowering the triggers that cause fat storage around the organs. Gut health is a central yet often overlooked factor in reducing visceral fat, and understanding the connection between the digestive system and fat storage can completely shift how we approach weight loss. The gut is more than just a passageway for food. It is a complex ecosystem of trillions of bacteria that influence digestion, immunity, hormone production, and even mood. When the gut is imbalanced with a higher proportion of harmful bacteria or inflammation present, it can trigger a cascade of negative effects that contribute directly to visceral fat accumulation. These effects include insulin resistance, poor nutrient absorption, increased inflammation, and dysregulated appetite signaling. Supporting gut health through dietary strategies, including the addition of a tablespoon of healthy fat daily, helps create an environment where visceral fat is more easily mobilized and burned. One of the primary ways gut health affects fat storage is through its influence on inflammation. The intestinal lining acts as a barrier that prevents harmful bacteria and toxins from entering the bloodstream. When this barrier is compromised, a condition often referred to as leaky gut, these substances can escape into circulation, triggering chronic systemic inflammation. This inflammation interferes with insulin signaling and encourages the body to store more visceral fat as a protective mechanism. Introducing healthy fats into the diet can support the integrity of the gut lining. Certain fatty acids, particularly those rich in omega-3s or monounsaturated fats, help repair the lining, reduce irritation, and foster a healthier balance of gut bacteria. This reduces the inflammatory signals that encourage fat accumulation, allowing insulin and other hormones to function properly and enable fat-burning pathways to activate. The gut microbiome itself also plays a role in determining how calories and nutrients are processed. Certain bacteria are more efficient at extracting energy from food, which can lead to greater fat storage if those bacterial populations dominate. A diet that includes healthy fats supports the growth of beneficial bacteria that improve metabolic efficiency without promoting excess storage. These beneficial bacteria help regulate glucose metabolism, enhance nutrient absorption, and produce short-chain fatty acids that communicate with the brain and liver to improve fat utilization. When the microbiome is balanced, the body is better able to transition into fat-burning mode, particularly in the abdominal cavity, where visceral fat tends to accumulate. Gut health is also tied closely to hunger and satiety hormones. Leptin, which signals fullness, and ghrelin, which signals hunger, both rely on proper communication between the gut, liver, and brain. When the gut is inflamed or imbalanced, leptin resistance can develop, causing the brain to believe the body is starving, even when energy stores are abundant. This leads to overeating and cravings that drive visceral fat accumulation. Healthy fats slow digestion and provide a steady source of energy that stabilizes blood sugar, helping ghrelin levels remain balanced. Additionally, they support the microbiome in producing compounds that enhance leptin sensitivity, allowing the brain to receive accurate signals of fullness. This results in more controlled appetite, fewer cravings, and less overconsumption, all of which are essential for reducing deep abdominal fat. Digestive efficiency is another critical factor. When the gut is compromised, nutrient absorption becomes impaired. This not only affects energy levels, but also alters how the body uses and stores fat. Healthy fats support bile production, which is essential for breaking down fats and fat-soluble vitamins. Improved bile flow enhances digestion, allowing nutrients to be absorbed more efficiently and supporting metabolic processes that encourage fat mobilization. With better digestion, the body can rely more on stored fat for energy, particularly when insulin is stabilized and fasting periods are naturally extended. The gut-liver connection is also key in the battle against visceral fat. Toxins or inflammatory compounds from an unhealthy gut can reach the liver and disrupt its ability to regulate glucose, insulin, and fat metabolism. When the liver becomes stressed, it stores more fat, especially in the abdominal region. Healthy fats help modulate gut inflammation, reducing the burden on the liver. A healthier liver can then release stored fat more efficiently, improving overall metabolism and accelerating visceral fat reduction. Healthy fats also provide precursors for the production of anti-inflammatory molecules and cell-signaling compounds that influence metabolic health. These compounds interact with the gut lining, liver, and adipose tissue to create a hormonal environment that favors fat burning. This is particularly important for visceral fat because this fat depot is highly sensitive to inflammatory and hormonal signals. By improving gut integrity and promoting the growth of beneficial bacteria, healthy fats indirectly optimize the signaling pathways that regulate the release of stored fat. Sleep and stress are other areas where gut health influences visceral fat. A compromised gut can affect the production of neurotransmitters like serotonin and GABA, which play roles in mood, sleep quality, and stress resilience. Poor sleep and chronic stress elevate cortisol, a hormone that drives visceral fat storage. By supporting the gut through dietary fats and reducing inflammation, these stress-related pathways are moderated, creating an internal environment where visceral fat is less likely to accumulate. In summary, gut health affects visceral fat through multiple interconnected pathways: inflammation, hormone signaling, nutrient absorption, liver function, and stress regulation. A tablespoon of healthy fat daily supports gut integrity, nourishes beneficial bacteria, stabilizes hormones, and reduces inflammation, creating the optimal conditions for the body to burn visceral fat efficiently. Hormones like ghrelin and leptin play a critical role in regulating hunger, appetite, and energy balance, and they are directly tied to the body's ability to burn visceral fat. Ghrelin, often called a hunger hormone, signals the brain when it's time to eat. It rises when the stomach is empty and falls after eating, theoretically helping the body maintain energy balance. Leptin, on the other hand, signals fullness and informs the brain about the body's stored energy levels, particularly fat. When these hormones are functioning optimally, they work in harmony to regulate appetite, reduce overeating, and ensure that the body uses stored fat efficiently. However, in many people, chronic poor diet, inflammation, and insulin resistance cause ghrelin and leptin signaling to become disrupted. When leptin resistance develops, the brain no longer accurately detects stored energy, making the body feel hungry even when it has ample fat reserves. Ghrelin levels may spike unpredictably, causing sudden intense hunger that leads to overeating and cravings. This hormonal imbalance is a major driver of visceral fat accumulation because the body interprets the hormonal signals as a need to store energy rather than burn it. One of the most effective ways to restore balance in these hormones is through dietary strategies that stabilize blood sugar and insulin. Insulin plays a critical role in hunger and fat storage. When it is chronically elevated, it interferes with leptin signaling, making the brain believe the body is starving. Introducing a small daily tablespoon of healthy fat helps reduce insulin spikes because fats have minimal impact on blood sugar. By keeping insulin levels lower and more stable throughout the day, leptin can communicate more effectively with the brain, restoring the body's natural sense of fullness and reducing the constant hunger signals that drive overeating. Healthy fats also slow digestion, which prolongs the release of energy and further supports stable ghrelin levels. By controlling the timing and intensity of hunger signals, the body can transition more easily into a fat-burning state, where visceral fat is accessible for energy. Healthy fats also influence the production of other signaling molecules that interact with ghrelin and leptin. Short-chain fatty acids produced in the gut from beneficial bacteria help regulate appetite hormones, improve insulin sensitivity, and reduce inflammation. Consuming a tablespoon of high-quality fat daily nourishes these beneficial bacteria, promoting a gut environment that supports healthy hormone function. When the gut is balanced and inflammation is reduced, the signals between fat tissue and the brain become more accurate, allowing the body to sense stored energy correctly. This reduces unnecessary eating and improves the efficiency of fat mobilization, particularly from the visceral region, which is highly sensitive to hormonal signals. Stress and sleep also interact with ghrelin and leptin, and both are strongly linked to visceral fat accumulation. Elevated cortisol from chronic stress disrupts leptin signaling, increases ghrelin production, and drives fat storage around the abdominal organs. Poor sleep amplifies these effects, further destabilizing hunger hormones and promoting overeating. Healthy fats help moderate the body's stress response by supporting stable blood sugar and reducing inflammatory stress signals. This creates a more balanced internal environment where hormones can normalize, reducing visceral fat-promoting behavior, such as late-night snacking and cravings for sugary or processed foods. Over time, these small hormonal shifts accumulate, allowing the body to regulate appetite naturally and burn stored fat more effectively. Another mechanism by which healthy fats support ghrelin and leptin balance is through metabolic flexibility. Metabolic flexibility refers to the body's ability to switch efficiently between burning carbohydrates and fats for energy. When the body is dependent on glucose and constantly experiencing insulin spikes, ghrelin and leptin signaling becomes erratic. Introducing a stable source of dietary fat encourages the body to rely more on fat for fuel, reducing spikes in hunger and improving satiety signals. As the body becomes more metabolically flexible, hunger becomes more predictable and easier to manage, allowing natural fasting periods to occur. These fasting windows are critical because insulin drops during fasting, and lower insulin promotes the release of stored visceral fat. Fatty acids also support leptin sensitivity by reducing inflammation in adipose tissue. Visceral fat itself produces inflammatory molecules that disrupt leptin signaling, creating a feedback loop where the body feels deprived despite having ample stored energy. Healthy fats help calm this inflammation, restoring the ability of fat cells to communicate accurately with the brain. When leptin signaling improves, the brain receives a correct message that energy stores are sufficient, reducing the drive to overeat and improving the body's ability to tap into stored fat reserves. Similarly, stable ghrelin levels reduce the intensity and frequency of hunger spikes, allowing energy intake to match the body's actual needs rather than its perceived deficiency. Supporting hormone balance through dietary fat also indirectly improves mental clarity, mood, and decision-making. When ghrelin and leptin are unstable, the brain experiences constant signals of hunger and stress, making it difficult to resist cravings or maintain healthy eating patterns. Stabilizing these hormones reduces these internal pressures, making it easier to make choices that support fat burning. A daily tablespoon of healthy fat acts as a simple yet powerful tool to support hormonal communication, restore appetite regulation, and encourage the body to rely on stored visceral fat for energy. Timing is one of the most overlooked factors in reducing visceral fat, and consuming a small daily habit, like a tablespoon of healthy fat, can have a significant impact when strategically integrated into your routine. The body's metabolism follows a natural rhythm influenced by circadian biology, hormone fluctuations, and meal timing. Eating at the wrong times, snacking constantly, or consuming high-carbohydrate foods late in the day can disrupt this rhythm, leading to higher insulin levels at times when fat burning should be occurring. When insulin is elevated at night, for example, the body is forced into storage mode while it should ideally be mobilizing stored fat for energy during fasting periods. By adding a tablespoon of healthy fat at the right time, the body receives a steady source of energy that stabilizes insulin, supports satiety, and promotes fat-burning processes during periods when the body would otherwise struggle to access stored fat. This strategic timing allows metabolism to operate in sync with natural hormonal cycles, making visceral fat reduction more efficient. Consuming healthy fats at the correct time also influences energy balance throughout the day. Many people experience energy dips in the morning or mid-afternoon, leading to snacking, caffeine dependence, or impulsive eating that keeps insulin high and fat-burning pathways blocked. A small portion of fat taken strategically, such as in the morning or before a long fasting period, provides sustained energy without spiking blood sugar. This stabilizes energy levels, reduces the urge to eat prematurely, and extends the time the body spends in a low insulin state. A consistent low insulin window is critical for the mobilization of visceral fat because it allows hormone-sensitive lipase to break down stored triglycerides into free fatty acids, which the body can then use for fuel. Over time, this simple habit trains the body to burn stored fat more efficiently, particularly in the abdominal area, which is highly sensitive to hormonal signals. Timing also interacts with the body's natural circadian rhythm, which affects hormone production, digestion, and metabolic efficiency. Cortisol, a hormone that rises in the morning to increase alertness, also influences blood sugar and fat metabolism. When healthy fats are consumed in alignment with this rhythm, they provide energy that complements the body's natural processes, preventing cortisol-driven spikes in hunger and insulin. Similarly, melatonin, which rises in the evening, influences glucose tolerance. Eating large carbohydrate-heavy meals late at night can interfere with insulin sensitivity and promote fat storage. Including a small amount of fat at the appropriate time supports stable blood sugar and satiety, allowing the body to maintain its natural circadian-driven metabolic patterns. Over time, this alignment between dietary timing and the body's internal clock enhances the efficiency of visceral fat burning and improves overall metabolic health. Another important factor is the relationship between meal timing, fasting windows, and hormone optimization. Time-restricted eating or intermittent fasting is effective for reducing visceral fat largely because it allows insulin levels to fall long enough for the body to enter a fat-burning state. Healthy fats taken strategically help extend these fasting windows by providing sustained energy that does not disrupt insulin levels. By delaying hunger and improving satiety, the body can naturally maintain a low insulin period for longer stretches. These extended periods of fat utilization give the liver, muscles, and adipose tissue more time to process stored energy efficiently, accelerating the reduction of visceral fat. The timing of fat intake also impacts hunger and appetite-regulating hormones like ghrelin and leptin. When fat is consumed at the right time, it slows digestion and prolongs the release of nutrients, helping to maintain balanced ghrelin levels and improve leptin sensitivity. Stable ghrelin reduces sudden hunger spikes, while improved leptin sensitivity allows the brain to accurately perceive stored energy levels. Together, these effects help prevent overeating, snacking between meals, and the hormonal confusion that often drives visceral fat accumulation. By timing the intake of healthy fats appropriately, the body experiences fewer extreme hunger signals, making it easier to maintain natural eating patterns and enhance fat-burning efficiency. Healthy fats also interact with liver function in a timing-dependent manner. The liver is central to controlling glucose, fat metabolism, and hormone balance. When fats are consumed strategically, they provide energy in a form that the liver can process efficiently without spiking insulin or overloading metabolic pathways. This supports the liver in mobilizing stored visceral fat for energy while maintaining a stable internal environment. Improved liver function over time further enhances the body's ability to regulate fat storage, hormonal balance, and energy distribution. Additionally, timing fat intake strategically can influence mental clarity, focus, and mood, which indirectly support visceral fat reduction. Erratic energy levels and blood sugar spikes often lead to fatigue, irritability, and stress-driven eating, all of which contribute to fat accumulation. Consuming a small portion of fat at the right moment supports steady energy, reduces cravings, and improves decision-making regarding food choices. This mental stability reinforces the body's natural ability to burn stored fat instead of continuously storing new fat, particularly around the abdominal organs, where visceral fat is most dangerous. By understanding the interplay between meal timing, hormone cycles, energy levels, and fat metabolism, a simple habit of consuming a tablespoon of healthy fat daily becomes a strategic tool for optimizing visceral fat loss, extending fat-burning windows, and improving overall metabolic health. Physical activity and movement amplify the effects of dietary strategies on visceral fat, and even small adjustments in daily movement can dramatically improve fat-burning outcomes when combined with consistent habits like consuming a tablespoon of healthy fat. Exercise influences insulin sensitivity, hormone balance, and metabolic flexibility, all of which are critical for mobilizing stubborn visceral fat. Many people assume that visceral fat can only be reduced through intense workouts or calorie restriction. But the reality is that the body's hormonal environment is far more important than the number of calories burned during exercise. Physical activity acts as a catalyst, helping the body use stored fat more efficiently. And when paired with healthy fats, it creates a synergy that accelerates fat reduction while supporting energy balance and metabolic resilience. One of the primary mechanisms by which physical activity reduces visceral fat is through improved insulin sensitivity. Muscles are major sites for glucose uptake, and when they are active, they can absorb glucose independently of insulin, lowering circulating blood sugar levels. This reduces a need for high insulin production, which in turn allows fat-burning pathways to remain active. Consuming healthy fats daily complements this process by keeping insulin stable even when meals are consumed. The combination of lower insulin and increased glucose uptake by muscles creates an ideal environment for the body to tap into stored fat, particularly in the visceral region. Unlike subcutaneous fat, which sits under the skin, visceral fat is metabolically active and responds quickly to hormonal cues, making this combination particularly effective. Movement also impacts key hormones involved in appetite regulation and stress response. Exercise increases the release of hormones like norepinephrine and growth hormone, both of which help mobilize stored fat and reduce visceral fat deposits. At the same time, regular physical activity reduces chronic cortisol levels, a hormone that drives abdominal fat accumulation when elevated over time. A daily tablespoon of healthy fat supports this hormonal balance by stabilizing energy, reducing inflammation, and improving satiety. Together, movement and dietary fat help maintain a low insulin, low cortisol state that encourages the body to burn visceral fat rather than store it. Physical activity also enhances metabolic flexibility, which is the body's ability to switch between burning carbohydrates and fats for energy. Many people today are metabolically inflexible, meaning their bodies rely primarily on glucose and struggle to access stored fat efficiently. Regular exercise, especially moderate-intensity activity like walking, cycling, or resistance training, trains the body to become more flexible, improving fat oxidation during both activity and rest. A consistent intake of healthy fat provides the substrate needed for this fat oxidation to occur smoothly, ensuring that the body has a reliable fuel source without triggering insulin spikes. Over time, this improves the body's ability to use stored visceral fat for energy, even outside of active periods, enhancing overall fat loss. Another important effect of movement is its impact on inflammation. Visceral fat produces inflammatory cytokines that interfere with insulin signaling and hormone function. Regular physical activity helps reduce systemic inflammation by improving circulation, promoting lymphatic flow, and supporting the body's natural detoxification processes. When combined with the anti-inflammatory properties of healthy fats, the reduction in inflammation accelerates visceral fat loss and improves overall metabolic health. The body becomes more efficient at using stored energy. Hormones communicate more effectively, and the cycle of fat accumulation is disrupted. Exercise also influences gut health, which is closely linked to visceral fat accumulation. Physical activity encourages a more diverse and resilient microbiome, which improves digestion, nutrient absorption, and the production of short-chain fatty acids that regulate metabolism. Healthy fats nourish beneficial gut bacteria, supporting the production of compounds that enhance insulin sensitivity and hormone signaling. Together, movement and dietary fat create a gut environment that promotes metabolic efficiency, stabilizes appetite, and reduces the risk of visceral fat accumulation driven by hormonal and inflammatory imbalances. In addition, physical activity improves cardiovascular function, blood flow, and oxygen delivery to tissues, which is essential for effective fat mobilization. Visceral fat is highly vascularized, meaning it responds well to hormonal and metabolic cues when the body is actively circulating blood and oxygen. A tablespoon of healthy fat supports this process by providing a clean, stable energy source, ensuring that the body has the fuel it needs for both movement and recovery. This combination enhances the rate at which visceral fat can be broken down and transported to tissues for energy use. Finally, integrating movement into daily routines reinforces behavioral consistency. When individuals commit to regular activity, it supports mindful eating, better stress management, and adherence to dietary habits, such as consuming healthy fats consistently. This combination of hormonal support, energy stabilization, and behavioral reinforcement creates a comprehensive approach to reducing visceral fat. Physical activity amplifies the metabolic benefits of healthy fats, helping the body burn stored energy more effectively, improve insulin sensitivity, reduce inflammation, and restore hormonal balance, all of which target the stubborn fat around the abdominal organs.